The white lace of her wedding dress dragged through the dust of the gravel parking lot as Emily Dawson collapsed onto the steps of the old stone church in Ridgewood, Tennessee. Her mascara ran in dark rivers down her cheeks, mixing with the tears that would not stop falling. The guests had all gone. The flowers wilted in the June heat. And the man who had promised to love her forever had walked away without a single word of explanation, leaving her surrounded by silence and the ruins of a dream she had carried since childhood. Inside the church, 300 white chairs sat empty now, their satin ribbons fluttering in the breeze that came through the open doors. The altar where she should have spoken her vows stood bare, the candles burned down to nothing. Her bouquet of white roses lay scattered across the wooden floor where she had thrown it in the first wave of disbelief. Everything she had planned for 2 years, every detail she had obsessed over, every dollar her mother had saved, all of it meant nothing now. Emily was 31 years old. She had waited her whole life for this moment. She had turned down other men, convinced that Marcus Webb was the one. He was handsome, successful, the son of the wealthiest family in the county. Everyone told her she was lucky. Everyone said she had found her prince. And now, sitting alone on those cold church steps, she understood that luck was just another word for blindness. The sound came from nowhere at first, a distant rumble like thunder rolling across the hills. Emily lifted her head, her eyes swollen and red, and looked toward the horizon. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the 2-lane road that led into town, and through the golden haze, she saw them coming. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. Their chrome caught the light like mirrors, and the roar of their engines grew louder with every passing second, until it filled the empty churchyard with a sound that seemed to shake the earth itself. She should have been afraid. Any woman in her position, alone and vulnerable, dressed in white and surrounded by strangers on bikes, should have felt terror grip her heart. But Emily felt something else entirely. She felt seen. For the first time in hours, someone was coming toward her instead of walking away. The lead rider pulled into the parking lot first, his black Harley-Davidson gleaming beneath him. He was a man in his 50s, with gray streaking his beard and lines carved deep into his face by years of wind and sun and hard living. On the back of his leather vest, the words Iron Guardians MC were stitched in silver thread, and beneath them, a patch that read, Founder. His name was Samuel Kane, though everyone who knew him called him Ghost, a nickname earned in the jungles of Vietnam, where he had served 3 tours and walked away from things that still visited him in dreams. Behind him came the others, 47 riders in all, men and women of every age and background united by a code that outsiders could never understand. They had been on their way to a charity ride in Nashville, 100 miles north, raising money for veterans who had come home broken in body and spirit. They had stopped in Ridgewood for gas and water, nothing more. But Ghost had seen the woman in white sitting alone on those steps, and something in his chest had tightened in a way he had not felt in years. He killed his engine and swung off the bike with the ease of a man who had spent half his life in the saddle. The other riders followed his lead, their machines falling silent one by one, until the only sound was the wind rustling through the oak trees that lined the churchyard. Ghost removed his sunglasses and walked toward Emily with slow, measured steps, his boots crunching against the gravel. She looked up at him, this stranger in leather and denim, and waited for him to speak. Her voice had abandoned her hours ago, stolen by the shock of watching her future dissolve like morning fog. Ghost stopped a few feet away and studied her face. He had seen that expression before, on the faces of soldiers who had lost everything, on the faces of mothers who had buried their children, on the faces of men who had nothing left to live for. It was the look of someone whose world had ended and who had not yet found the strength to build a new one. He lowered himself onto the step beside her, keeping a respectful distance, and stared out at the empty road. "The wedding," he said quietly. "It did not happen." Emily shook her head. "He left," she whispered. "He just left. No explanation. No goodbye. He just walked out the back door and drove away." Ghost nodded slowly, as if this made perfect sense to him, as if he had heard this story 1,000 times before. And in a way, he had. The details changed, but the pain was always the same. Someone trusted, someone believed, and someone else decided that trust was not worth keeping. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emily. Emily Dawson." Ghost extended his hand, rough and calloused from decades of work. "I am Samuel," he said. "Most people call me Ghost, and these are my brothers and sisters." He gestured toward the riders who had gathered in a loose semicircle around the parking lot. Some leaned against their bikes, others stood with their arms crossed, but all of them watched Emily with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked almost like protectiveness. "We were passing through," Ghost continued, "on our way to Nashville for a ride, but it seems like maybe we were supposed to stop here instead." Emily looked at the bikers, at their leather vests and their weathered faces, at the patches and pins that told stories she could not yet read. In another life, she might have been afraid of them. But today, in this moment, they were the only people who had not abandoned her. "I do not know what to do," she said, her voice cracking. "Everyone is gone. My family went home. My friends disappeared. I have nowhere to go. He was supposed to take me to our new apartment after the reception. I gave up my old place last month. I have nothing." Ghost was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to face her directly, his blue eyes steady and calm. "You have something," he said. "You have today. And today you are not alone." He stood and walked back to his bike, where he retrieved a bottle of water from his saddlebag. He brought it to Emily and pressed it into her hands. "Drink," he said. "Then we will figure out what comes next." Emily took the water and drank deeply, suddenly aware of how thirsty she was. She had not eaten or drunk anything since the night before, too nervous and excited to think about food. Now her body reminded her that it needed care, even when her heart felt like it was dying. While she drank, Ghost called a meeting with his senior riders. They gathered near the church entrance, speaking in low voices, occasionally glancing toward Emily with expressions of concern. She could not hear what they were saying, but she watched their faces, the way they listened to each other, the way they nodded in agreement. There was no arguing, no conflict, just a group of people making a decision together. After a few minutes, Ghost returned to her side. "Here is what we are going to do," he said. "There is a diner about 2 miles down the road. Rosa's. Good food, good people. We are going to take you there, get you something to eat, and help you figure out your next move. You do not have to figure this out alone." Emily stared at him, uncomprehending. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." Ghost smiled, and for a moment the hardness in his face softened into something almost gentle. "Because that is what we do," he said. "We take care of people who need taking care of, and right now you need someone in your corner. So here we are." He extended his hand again, this time offering to help her stand. Emily hesitated. Everything she had believed about the world had shattered in the past few hours. She had trusted Marcus completely, given him her heart and her future, and he had thrown it away like it meant nothing. How could she trust anyone again? How could she believe that kindness existed in a world that had shown her so much cruelty? But there was something in Ghost's eyes, something steady and true, that made her reach out and take his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and he helped her to her feet with the care of someone who understood that she was fragile in ways that went far beyond her body. One of the female riders, a woman in her 40s with silver hair and kind eyes, approached with a jacket. "For the ride," she said. "The wind can be cold, even in summer." Emily accepted the jacket and slipped it over her wedding dress, the leather heavy and warm against her bare shoulders. It smelled like road dust and freedom, like a life completely different from the one she had imagined for herself. Ghost led her to his bike and showed her where to sit, where to put her feet, how to hold on. "Just lean into the turns," he said. "Trust the machine. Trust me." Emily climbed onto the back of the Harley, her white dress bunching awkwardly around her legs. She wrapped her arms around Ghost's waist and held on tight, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else she could not name. Anticipation, maybe, or hope. The engines roared to life, 48 motorcycles singing in unison, and the Iron Guardians pulled out of the churchyard in a formation as precise as any military convoy. Emily felt the vibration of the machine beneath her, the rush of wind against her face, the strange sensation of moving forward when everything inside her wanted to stay frozen in place. They rode through the streets of Ridgewood, past the coffee shop where she and Marcus had their first date, past the park where he proposed, past all the landmarks of a relationship that had promised so much and delivered so little. People stopped on the sidewalks to stare, their mouths hanging open at the sight of a bride on the back of a motorcycle, surrounded by bikers in leather and chrome. Emily did not care what they thought. For the first time in hours, she was not alone. And that was enough. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel, because every story we tell is a reminder that angels sometimes wear leather and ride with thunder. Subscribe now and join the journey. Rosa's diner sat at the edge of town like a relic from another era, its neon sign flickering in the afternoon light, promising home cooking and strong coffee to anyone who walked through its doors. The parking lot was nearly empty when the motorcycles pulled in, but within minutes every available space was filled with gleaming chrome and black leather. Rosa herself came out to see what all the commotion was about. She was a woman in her 60s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and hands that had spent a lifetime kneading dough and flipping pancakes. Her eyes widened when she saw the convoy of bikers, but she did not look afraid. She had been running this diner for 35 years, and she had seen just about everything. Then she noticed Emily, still in her wedding dress, climbing off the back of Ghost's motorcycle with mascara-stained cheeks and red-rimmed eyes. "Oh, honey," Rosa said, rushing forward with her arms outstretched. "What happened to you?" Emily opened her mouth to explain, but the words caught in her throat. Ghost stepped forward and spoke on her behalf. "Wedding did not go as planned," he said simply. "She needs a hot meal and a safe place to sit for a while. Can you help us out?" Rosa's expression shifted from concern to determination. "You bring her inside right now," she said. "I will have the back room cleared out. She can have all the privacy she needs." The bikers filed into the diner, filling the booths and counter stools, their voices a low murmur of conversation, as they ordered coffee and pie and whatever else Rosa had on special. But Ghost led Emily to the back room, a small space usually reserved for birthday parties and church groups, where a single table sat beneath a window that looked out over the rolling hills of Tennessee. Emily sank into a chair and stared at her hands, still trembling despite the warmth of the room. Ghost sat across from her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Tell me about him," he said. "The man who left." Emily was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, the words began to come. "His name is Marcus Webb," she said. "His family owns half the businesses in this county. Banks, car dealerships, the furniture factory over on Route 9. They are the kind of people who think they are better than everyone else, and I was too blind to see it." She told him how they met at a charity gala 3 years ago, how Marcus had swept her off her feet with expensive dinners and romantic gestures. He said all the right things, made all the right promises. He told her she was special, that she was different from the other women he had dated. She believed him because she wanted to believe him, because the alternative was admitting that her judgment was flawed, that she had wasted years of her life on someone who did not deserve her. "When did you realize something was wrong?" Ghost asked. Emily shook her head. "That is the thing," she said. "I did not realize. Not until he walked out. There were signs, I suppose, looking back. He would disappear for hours without explanation. He would get phone calls in the middle of the night and leave the room to answer them. His mother looked at me like I was something she had scraped off her shoe. But I made excuses for all of it. I told myself it was just the stress of the wedding, the pressure of his family, the demands of his work. I convinced myself that everything would be fine once we were married. And then we were standing at the altar," she said, her voice breaking. "The music was playing. Everyone was watching. And I saw his face go pale. He looked at me like he had never seen me before. And then he just turned around and walked out the back door. He did not say a word. He just left." Tears began to fall again, silent and steady, dripping onto the white lace of her dress. Ghost reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "That is not about you," he said firmly. "A man who does that, who makes a promise and then breaks it in front of everyone, that is about him. That is about his weakness, his cowardice, his inability to face the truth. You did nothing wrong." "Then why does it feel like my fault?" Emily whispered. "Because that is what pain does," Ghost said. "It makes us blame ourselves for the cruelty of others. But I have seen enough broken people in my life to know the difference between a victim and a villain. And you, Emily Dawson, are not the villain in this story." Rosa appeared with 2 plates of food, meatloaf and mashed potatoes and green beans, comfort food that smelled like home. She set them down without a word and squeezed Emily's shoulder before disappearing back into the kitchen. Emily stared at the plate, her appetite non-existent. "I have not eaten since yesterday," she admitted. "I was too nervous." "Then eat now," Ghost said. "Your body needs fuel, even when your heart is hurting." She picked up her fork and took a small bite. The food was warm and good, and she felt some of the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "Who are you?" she asked between bites. "Really, I mean. You said you are called Ghost." "Why?" Ghost leaned back in his chair, a distant look crossing his face. "I served in Vietnam," he said. 68 to 71, 3 tours in places most people have never heard of. Did things I cannot talk about, saw things I still see when I close my eyes. When I came home, I was different. Everyone could see it. My wife used to say I walked through the house like a ghost, there but not there, present but somewhere else entirely. The name stuck." He paused, looking at the patches on his vest. I started the Iron Guardians 20 years ago, he continued. A lot of us are veterans. Some are not. But we all share the same belief. We look out for each other, and we look out for anyone who needs help. That is our code. That is who we are. Emily considered this, turning the words over in her mind. That sounds like a family, she said. It is, Ghost agreed. Maybe the only real family some of us have ever had. Outside the window, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emily watched the colors shift and change, feeling something stir inside her that she had not expected. It was not hope, exactly. It was more like the possibility of hope, a tiny seed planted in the scorched earth of her heart. The door to the back room opened, and one of the younger riders stepped in. He was maybe 25, with bright green eyes and a nervous energy that made him seem out of place among the weathered veterans. Ghost, he said. We got a problem. What kind of problem? The kid swallowed hard. The groom just pulled into the parking lot, and he brought friends. Ghost's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened in a way that made Emily's stomach clench. How many? 6 cars. Maybe 15, 20 people. They look upset. Ghost stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. Stay here, he told Emily. Do not come outside until I say it is safe. But this is not a discussion, Ghost said, his voice gentle but firm. Whatever is about to happen, you do not need to be part of it. Let us handle this. He walked out of the back room without another word, the door swinging shut behind him. Emily sat alone at the table, her heart pounding, and listened to the sounds of engines revving and voices rising in the parking lot beyond the walls. Chapter 3. Marcus Webb stepped out of his silver Mercedes with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. He was tall and handsome, with carefully styled hair and clothes that cost more than most people earned in a month. Behind him, a small army of young men in expensive suits emerged from a fleet of luxury vehicles, their faces twisted with the kind of anger that comes from wounded pride. Ghost walked out of the diner to meet them, flanked by a dozen Iron Guardians. The rest of the club had positioned themselves around the parking lot, their bodies forming a loose perimeter, their faces calm but watchful. Where is she? Marcus demanded. Where is my fiancée? Ghost studied him for a long moment, taking in the tailored suit, the designer watch, the manicured hands that had probably never done a day of hard labor. She is not your fiancée anymore, Ghost said quietly. You made sure of that when you walked out on her. Marcus's face flushed red. You do not understand, he said. She needs to come with me. There has been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, Ghost repeated. You left her standing at the altar in front of 300 people. You humiliated her. You broke her heart. And now you want to call it a misunderstanding? This is none of your business, Marcus snapped. She is my responsibility. Ghost took a step forward, and despite the fact that Marcus was taller and younger, the older man seemed to fill the space between them with a presence that made the groom take an involuntary step back. She stopped being your responsibility the moment you abandoned her, Ghost said. Now she is under our protection. And that means you do not get to talk to her, look at her, or come anywhere near her unless she says otherwise. One of Marcus's friends, a thick-necked young man with a receding hairline and too much product in his hair, stepped forward. You think we are scared of a bunch of old bikers, he sneered. You do not know who you are dealing with. Ghost did not even look at him. I know exactly who I am dealing with, he said. A spoiled boy who thinks money makes him powerful. a coward who runs away from his promises, a man who surrounds himself with other weak men because he cannot stand on his own. I have faced worse than you in places you cannot even imagine. So please, tell me again what I should be afraid of." The parking lot fell silent. Even the birds in the trees seemed to hold their breath. Marcus's jaw tightened. "My father will hear about this," he said. "He will destroy you. He will destroy this diner. He will make sure none of you ever work in this county again." Ghost smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your father," he said. "Let me tell you something about your father. I know men like him. Men who build their empires on the backs of others, who use money and influence to get whatever they want. But there is one thing men like that never understand. Power is not about wealth or status. Power is about standing for something. And right now, the only thing your family stands for is cruelty dressed up in expensive clothes." He turned to address the group of young men behind Marcus. "Go home," he said. "Tell your fathers what happened here. Tell them that a woman was wronged, and strangers stood up for her when no one else would. Tell them that there are still people in this world who care about honor and decency. And then ask yourselves if you want to be remembered as the kind of men who bully a heartbroken woman, or the kind of men who actually deserve respect." For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, one of the young men in the back turned and walked to his car. Then another. Then another. Within minutes, half of Marcus's entourage had driven away, leaving him standing alone with a handful of loyal friends who did not look quite so confident anymore. "This is not over," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Actually," Ghost replied, "it is. You just do not know it yet." He turned his back on Marcus, a gesture of dismissal more powerful than any words, and walked toward the diner. Emily watched from the window of the back room, her hands pressed against the glass. She had seen everything, heard everything, felt her heart swell with something she had not expected to feel ever again. Gratitude. And something deeper than gratitude. A sense that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in this world. Marcus stood in the parking lot for another long moment, his face a mask of fury and confusion. Then he got back in his car and drove away, leaving nothing behind but dust and the fading sound of his engine. Ghost returned to the back room and found Emily still standing at the window. "He is gone," Ghost said. "I heard," Emily replied. "I heard everything you said to him." Ghost nodded. "He will be back," he said. "Men like that do not give up easily. Their pride will not let them. But we will deal with that when it happens." Emily turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You could just leave. You have no obligation to me. This is not your fight." Ghost was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. 30 years ago, he said finally, I came home from the war and I had nothing. No family, no job, no purpose. I was lost in ways you cannot imagine. And one day, I was sitting in a diner just like this one thinking about ending it all when a stranger sat down across from me. He did not know me from anyone. He just saw a man in pain and he chose to help. He talked to me for 3 hours. He listened to my story. He gave me a reason to keep going. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. That stranger became my best friend, Ghost continued. He was the one who helped me start the Iron Guardians. He taught me that the only way to heal your own pain is to help others heal theirs. He passed away 5 years ago, but I think about him every day. And every time I see someone who needs help, I think about what he would do. And I know, without a doubt, that he would stop. He would sit down. He would help. That is the legacy I carry. That is why I am here. Emily felt the tears spill over, running down her cheeks in warm streams. But these were not the same tears she had cried on the church steps. These were tears of something else entirely. Relief, maybe, or the first fragile stirrings of healing. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how I will ever repay you." Ghost shook his head. "You do not repay kindness," he said. "You pass it on. Someday you will see someone who needs help, and you will remember this moment, and you will stop. You will sit down. You will help. That is how the world gets better. One person at a time." The night settled over Ridgewood like a gentle blanket, and the Iron Guardians made arrangements for Emily to stay at a small motel on the edge of town. Rosa offered her a job at the diner, nothing fancy, just waitressing to start, but it was honest work and it came with meals and a sense of purpose. The female rider who had given Emily her jacket, a woman named Diane who had once been a nurse in the army, offered to help her find a more permanent place to live once she got back on her feet. For the first time since Marcus had walked out, Emily felt like she could breathe. 3 weeks passed, and Emily Dawson began to rebuild her life one small piece at a time. She traded her wedding dress for jeans and a Rosa's Diner t-shirt. She learned the names of the regular customers, memorized the specials, discovered that she actually enjoyed the rhythm of the work. The simple act of bringing someone a cup of coffee and watching their face light up with gratitude filled something inside her that had been empty for longer than she wanted to admit. The Iron Guardians had continued on to Nashville for their charity ride, but they stayed in touch. Ghost called every few days to check on her, and Diane sent text messages with encouraging words and practical advice. Emily had never had siblings, but she imagined this was what it felt like to have older brothers and sisters watching out for you. Marcus had not returned, but his presence lingered over the town like a shadow. His family owned too many businesses, employed too many people. Everyone knew that crossing the webs meant risking your livelihood. Some of the regulars at the diner looked at Emily with sympathy. Others avoided her entirely, afraid of being associated with the woman who had embarrassed the most powerful family in the county. Emily tried not to let it bother her. She focused on her work, on saving money, on planning for a future that did not include a man who had never truly loved her. But late at night, alone in her small motel room, the doubts crept in. What if she was making a mistake? What if no one else would ever want her? What if she spent the rest of her life alone, serving coffee and cleaning tables, watching other people live the life she had dreamed of? It was during one of these dark nights that her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. "Emily Dawson," a woman's voice said. "My name is Catherine Price. I am an attorney in Nashville. I represent a client who has information about Marcus Webb that I think you need to hear." Emily sat up in bed, her heart suddenly pounding. What kind of information? "The kind that explains why he left you at the altar," Catherine said, "and the kind that could change everything for you. Can you meet me tomorrow?" Emily agreed, and the next morning she borrowed Rosa's car and drove 2 hours to Nashville. Catherine Price's office was on the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown, sleek and modern and intimidating. But the woman who greeted her was warm and professional, with kind eyes behind designer glasses. "Thank you for coming," Catherine said, gesturing for Emily to sit. "I know this must be confusing." "To say the least," Emily replied. "Who is your client?" And what does any of this have to do with me? Catherine folded her hands on her desk. My client is a woman named Sarah Mitchell. 2 years ago, she was engaged to Marcus Webb, and 1 month before their wedding, he abandoned her in almost exactly the same way he abandoned you. Emily felt the blood drain from her face. There was someone before me? There have been several, Catherine said gently. Sarah was the third. You are the fifth. Marcus Webb has a pattern of pursuing women, promising them the world, and then disappearing when commitment becomes real. We believe it is connected to a trust fund provision in his family's estate. He receives a significant payment each time he becomes engaged, but the payment is forfeited if he actually gets married before the age of 35. Emily stared at her, struggling to process what she was hearing. He never intended to marry me, she said slowly. It was all about money. I am afraid so, Catherine confirmed. Sarah hired me to investigate after her own experience. We have documented evidence of his pattern, financial records, testimony from former fiancés, everything. Sarah wants to go public with this information, and she wanted to give you the opportunity to be part of that. Why? Emily asked. Why does she care what happens to me? Because she was alone when it happened to her, Catherine said. She had no one to help her, no one to believe her. It nearly destroyed her. When she heard about what happened at your wedding, about the bikers who stood up for you, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. She hopes that together, you can prevent Marcus from doing this to anyone else. Emily sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of this revelation settling over her. All the love she had felt for Marcus, all the dreams she had built around him, had been nothing more than a con. She had been a mark, a target, a means to an end. The humiliation of the wedding was bad enough. But knowing that it had been planned, calculated, turned her grief into something harder and sharper. What do you need me to do? She asked. Catherine smiled. Tell your story, she said. That is all. The truth has a power that money cannot buy. The news broke on a Tuesday morning, carried by every major outlet in Tennessee, and picked up by national media within hours. The headline read, Webb family heir accused of serial engagement fraud. 5 women came forward, each with a similar story of promises made and broken, of hearts shattered for financial gain. Emily's face appeared alongside the others, but she was not ashamed. She was not hiding. She stood tall and told her truth, and the world listened. The reaction was swift and devastating for the Webb family. Businesses that had operated on reputation alone found their customers disappearing. The bank that Marcus's father owned faced a run of withdrawals. Politicians who had accepted donations suddenly returned the money and issued statements distancing themselves from the family. In a matter of weeks, the empire that had taken generations to build began to crumble. Marcus himself disappeared. Some said he fled to Europe. Others claimed he was hiding in a family property somewhere in the mountains. Emily did not care where he was. She only cared that he could not hurt anyone else. The Iron Guardians returned to Ridgewood on a Saturday afternoon, their engines announcing their arrival like a fanfare. Emily was working the lunch shift at Rosa's when she heard the familiar rumble, and she ran outside with her apron still on, her face breaking into a smile so wide it hurt. Ghost was the first off his bike, and he wrapped her in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground. We saw the news, he said. You did good, kid. Real good. I could not have done it without you, Emily replied. Any of it. You gave me the courage to fight back. No, Ghost said, shaking his head. The courage was always yours. We just reminded you it was there. The club had come bearing gifts. A leather jacket with the Iron Guardians patch on the back, making her an honorary member, a donation to Rose's diner to help with renovations, and a promise that whenever Emily needed them, wherever she was, they would come. That evening, the entire town seemed to gather at Rose's for an impromptu celebration. People who had avoided Emily for weeks now lined up to shake her hand and tell her how brave she was. The hypocrisy was not lost on her, but she chose to accept their words at face value. Holding grudges took energy she did not have to spare. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Emily found herself sitting on the steps outside the diner, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to black. Ghost sat down beside her, just as he had on the church steps all those weeks ago. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. Emily considered the question. A month ago, she had no answer. Her future had been tied to a man who did not deserve her, and when he left, she felt like she had nothing. But now, sitting here, surrounded by friends she had never expected to make, she realized that she had more than she had ever had before. "I am going to stay," she said, "at least for a while. Rosa offered to make me a partner in the diner. She wants to retire eventually, and she thinks I have what it takes to run this place." Ghost nodded approvingly. "You would be good at that," he said. "You have a way with people. They trust you." Emily smiled. "I learned from the best," she said. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of laughter and music drifting out from inside the diner. Then Ghost spoke again. "You know," he said, "the hardest part of life is not the bad things that happen to us. It is what we choose to do after. Some people let the pain define them. They become bitter, angry, closed off from the world. But others take that pain and turn it into something else. Something beautiful. Something that helps other people. That is what you have done, Emily. You took the worst day of your life and turned it into a beginning instead of an ending." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She had cried enough. Now was a time for looking forward. "I want to help other women," she said. "Women who have been through what I have been through. Sarah and I have been talking about starting a foundation, a place where they can get legal help, counseling, support, a place where they know they are not alone." Ghost placed his hand on her shoulder. "That sounds like exactly the kind of thing this world needs," he said, "and I know you will make it happen. If you are watching this story and it has touched your heart, pause for a moment and leave a comment saying, 'Sometimes the worst day becomes the first day.' Share your story. We want to hear from you." 1 year later, Emily Dawson stood at the podium of a conference center in Nashville, looking out at an audience of 500 people. Behind her, a banner read, "Rising Strong Foundation, First Annual Gala." Beside her on the stage sat Sarah Mitchell and 3 other women who had survived Marcus Webb's deception. In the front row, a group of bikers in leather vests watched with pride. Emily cleared her throat and began to speak. 1 year ago today," she said, "I was left standing at the altar by a man who never loved me. I thought my life was over. I thought I would never recover from the shame and the heartbreak. I thought I was alone." She paused, letting the words settle over the crowd. "But I was wrong," she continued. "I was not alone. On the worst day of my life, strangers became family. People who had no reason to help me chose to stand by my side. They taught me that courage is not about never falling down. It is about getting back up. It is about refusing to let cruelty win. It is about finding the strength to turn your pain into purpose. She gestured to the women beside her. We are here tonight because we refuse to be victims, Emily said. We refuse to let one man's greed and cowardice define our lives. We chose to fight back, not with anger, but with truth. And because of that choice, we have been able to help hundreds of women who were going through the same thing we went through. Women who felt alone. Women who felt ashamed. Women who did not know where to turn. The audience burst into applause, and Emily felt her heart swell with an emotion she could not quite name. It was bigger than happiness, deeper than pride. It was the feeling of having found her place in the world. After the speeches and the dinner and the dancing, Emily made her way to the table where the Iron Guardians sat. Ghost stood to greet her, his face beaming with something that looked almost like fatherly pride. You did it, he said. You really did it. We did it, Emily corrected. None of this would have happened without you. Ghost shook his head. We just gave you a ride and a meal, he said. You did the rest. Emily laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful after so many months of tears. Well, she said, I guess that is what families do. They show up when you need them. Ghost pulled her into a hug, and for a moment, Emily allowed herself to feel completely safe. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be challenges and setbacks and days when she wanted to give up. But she knew now that she would never have to face them alone. As the gala wound down and the guests began to leave, Emily stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars were bright above Nashville, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. She thought about everything that had happened in the past year, all the pain and growth and transformation. She thought about the woman she had been on her wedding day, broken and lost and alone. And she thought about the woman she had become, strong and purposeful and surrounded by love. The sound of motorcycles starting up filled the air, a familiar rumble that had come to mean safety and home. Emily watched as the Iron Guardians prepared to ride out, their chrome glinting in the parking lot lights. Ghost walked over to her one last time. You know where to find us, he said, whenever you need us. I know, Emily replied, and you know where to find me. He nodded, then climbed onto his bike and started the engine. The convoy pulled out of the parking lot in perfect formation, their taillights disappearing into the darkness like fireflies. Emily stood there for a long moment, watching them go. Then she turned and walked back inside, ready to face whatever came next. Because that is what survivors do. They do not just survive. They rise. They help others rise. They turn their darkest moments into lights that guide the way for everyone who comes after them. And sometimes, on the worst day of their lives, they hear the roar of engines and discover that angels really do exist. They just happen to ride motorcycles. If you watched until the end, it means this story touched your heart. Leave a comment saying, I watched until the end. So we can get to know you and know who really appreciates the stories on this channel. Do not forget to leave your like, as it helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that they are not alone, that there are still good people in this world ready to stand up for those who need help. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because every story we tell is a reminder that hope rides on two wheels, and brotherhood never abandons those who need it most. Thank you for being part of this family. Until the next story.